This is Hong Kong. The year 2012, 4 years after the greatest economic collapse since the Great Depression. It's easy to say not much has changed, except our confidence in the system that made billions richer and happier. Capitalism. And right after the recession, who do we go to blame first? Capitalism. We've heard it everywhere. But why, really? Is capitalism truly a system run by greed and only greed? Is it possible to maximize profits while being moral? Really? Has capitalism actually been doing more harm than good? Or is it really the other way around? Hold on to your seats, everyone. I'll admit, we live in a pretty strange city. We spend our time enjoying the scenery, walking around and talking, but we never really take the time to pay attention to what's actually going on around us. For example, whenever we go to a Starbucks, we do our homework and we drink our coffee, but we never ask where the coffee comes from. Now, just a little bit of common sense will tell us that it probably comes from some poor coffee farmer living in a third world country. And the same goes with our shoes, which are probably made in sweatshops. And that's the topic of Naomi Klein's No Logo, an extremely influential book and a primer on the anti-globalization movement. And of course, everyone joined the bandwagon. But we have to remember that No Logo was written more than a decade ago, when the fear was of companies taking over the world, but I'm not sure that's going to happen anymore. And what I mean to say is that most corporations nowadays aren't doing that great. Despite this, she published another book a few years ago called The Shock Doctrine, which was hailed as passionate, hugely informative, and wonderfully controversial. That book attacks the freedom in free markets. But what exactly is a free market?
We now present to you the history of the free market in 60 seconds or more. The word free market comes from the word free and market. Free means enjoying personal rights or liberty as a person who is not in slavery. Market is defined as trade or traffic. So a free market means an economic system in which prices and wages are determined by unrestricted competition between businesses, without government regulation. Prices are thus determined by supply and demand and not by some planner. Its connotations, however, have varied over time. In the 1700s, Adam Smith stated that a free market is an economy free of monopoly rents. Although this definition eventually evolved into a market with monopolies and no rules. But that's not a free market. If a free market is going to be a game, there's going to be rules. So let's put down several basic rules. Number 1, the players cannot win the game. Number 2, the players playing the game cannot make the rules. Number 3, the players can spend their resources on anything they want. And number 4, totally evil people will be rejected from the game. There, and stop. So what do people think about the free market?
Just in case you can't see the graph, this shows the amount of people who think that the free market is positive. That is, they strongly agree that having a free market is the best system out there. 59% of Americans think so. Fantastic, right? Well, no. Because 10 years ago, 80% thought so. And that's just the Americans. So, needless to say, most people are losing their faith in capitalism and free markets. Why? Well, they have their reasons. Of course, one of the reasons why people think capitalism is bad because companies will be able to exploit everyone else, and we need a system with larger government regulation, an essentially planned economy. Okay, sure, but what about the people who think socialism is a better alternative? One survey found that for the first time, people viewed socialism more positively than negatively. Of course, I have my doubts that these people actually think socialism is a good idea. Because socialism is where the means of production and distribution of goods and services are controlled by the government. Doesn't mean the government is taking wealth away from the rich, but it means that the government gets to determine the amount of goods and services the rich can produce and sell and how much they can charge. Of course, there is a huge problem with this, because you can easily control prices. You have to be able, at least, to predict the future. For example, if there was a frost coming to Brazil, and all the coffee crops would die, people will then have to shop for their coffee in a country like Timor. That's just the way the world works. And then, the farmers there, seeing the opportunity, will raise the prices, and then they'll spend the money buying, say, new roofing for the buildings. As a result, the prices of aluminum is going to rise too. See, it's not that socialism is evil and it makes people lazy. It's sadly just too difficult to make it work. And then these same people who endorse socialism are usually the ones who criticize transnationals for using sweatshop labor. Obviously, sweatshops aren't great, but the people that work in sweatshops are not actually forced to work there. So why do they work there? Because it's a huge improvement over any other alternative they have. For example, in 1999, when the Child Labor Deterrence Act was introduced in the United States, 50,000 children lost their jobs in sweatshops. Where did they go after that? UNICEF followed them and found the new jobs for careers in stone crushing, street hustling, and prostitution. Johan Norberg points out an irony. Sweatshop critics say that we shouldn't buy from countries like Vietnam because of its labor standards. They've got it all wrong. They're saying, look, you are too poor to trade with us, and that means we won't trade with you. We won't buy your goods until you're as rich as we are. That's totally backwards. These countries won't get rich without being able to export goods. Furthermore, Professor of Economics Benjamin Powell from San Jose University argues that sweatshop-type jobs in developing countries are vast improvements over the other employment options, and that even the United States itself went through a period of sweatshop labor during its development. Despite the working conditions and wages in factories being very poor, the economy shifted from agricultural to industrial, and as a result, sufficient wealth was created to form a large middle class. And with this labor movement came a rise of income, and workers began to demand better wages along with better working conditions. Eventually, these American workers formed unions, had good rights, health insurance, retirement pensions, and so on. In addition, Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman stated that sweatshops create a ripple effect that benefits everyone. With people moving the city to work, the pressure on the land relaxes, and so rural wages for farmers rise. Meanwhile, in the city, the pool of unemployed workers shrink, and as a result, companies and factories start to compete with each other for workers, and because of that, wages also begin to rise. In time, average wages creep up to a level comparable to minimum wage jobs in the United States. We can hate on Nike all we want for paying the workers so little and making them work so much, but the most persistent demand that workers give to Nike isn't actually better working conditions. Ironically, sweatshop workers for Nike want the company to expand their factories more, so their relatives can work there as well. Another example is in the Honduras. The average sweatshop worker earns $13 a day, yet 44% of the country lives on less than $2 a day. Of course, I'm not trying to say all corporations are doing the right things. Many of them are being rather irresponsible and now they're paying for it. But we've got to be more careful in the companies we choose to criticize or boycott, because it could very well deprive poor people of opportunities to get rich. Is that moral? I don't think so. On the flip side, though, you have people who are far, far too irresponsible to be running a company. And a lot of it is because of the cult of Ayn Rand. For the people who are unfamiliar with this, Rand's philosophy called objectivism basically says that selfishness is a virtue. Of course, this has led to some pretty nasty things happening. Thankfully, though, most of the people that have done this are now behind bars. But where do we go from here?
Transnational companies could play a role as advisor to these countries, only to benefit from the low cost of operating in this market. So I think we should welcome international companies going into different places, but again in a responsible way.
It's amusing how often we get excited at every opportunity we get to change the world. Sometimes people can make it seem so easy that all you need to do is hop on and blame the businessmen for everything, and sometimes it's justified because they're not always responsible. But it's equally as irresponsible to say you're serious about humanity if we're just going to end up accidentally making things worse for others. It's too easy nowadays to criticize capitalism. No one should actually believe in it, because it means nothing. We should believe in our capacity for making the world better from being allowed to encounter and exchange with each other. That's real liberty. And that's legitimately cool. Because believing in capitalism doesn't mean believing in growth, economy, or efficiency. It's belief and confidence in our responsibility. It's belief in mankind. Okay, you can stop the cheesy music. Yeah, just stop it. Stop it. Come on, it's 3 a.m. I want to go to bed. Yeah, just stop it. Stop.